Call of Duty Mobile Battle Royale went through a lot of changes since it came out, and one of the things which went through a lot of changes is the isolated map. Isolated was the only full-fledged Battle Royale map in Call of Duty Mobile Battle Royale for almost 2 years. In these 2 years and also after that, isolated map is going through a lot of changes. So in this video, we'll be talking about 5 of the best versions of isolated that we had in the past 2.5 years of playing isolated in Call of Duty Mobile Battle Royale. Initially, the isolated map was a very small map, and later on it had a lot of new locations added into it. Finally, it came to a point there were no much new locations left to be added. That's when we had a lot of different changes in the atmospheric conditions of the isolated, if that makes sense, which gave the isolated a slightly different look despite the entire map being exactly same. In this, we won't be comparing it with Blackout, obviously. We won't be comparing of how different it looks on the basis of different graphic settings, and also we won't be considering the battle royale that we had during the zombie mode which was added in the game, because that specifically was for the zombie mode and it had nothing to do with the actual BR games. So with that in mind, let's get started. Okay, so to begin with, let's start with the number 2, which according to me is the second best version of isolated that we had, and this one has to be the Halloween 2021 version. I'm sure a lot of guys must have played this back in the time. I'm not sure if a lot of people actually liked this map, but I absolutely loved it. It was a complete night version of the isolated, and I think that's the only night map in Battle Royale we ever got if we consider Alcatraz, Blackout and isolated together. To be honest, the visibility in that was really good, unless of course you have an opposition with very dark skins, then it might be slightly difficult to spot your oppositions, but I think it's completely fine considering we have the red markers on the shoulders of the opposition, so it was very much easy to spot your opponents almost anywhere. And the cool part of this version was, even today if you just want to play this version, I think it's very much possible for the developers to make a few changes and we would have the night version once in a while without having to have download new files or have a separately different map downloaded in your system. So that according to me is really cool, and I really hope we keep getting this map on a rotation basis, say once a week. So at number 5, we have the current version of the isolated, and by current version I don't mean the current Sandstorm version, the version that we have apart from the Sandstorm event. So for example, if you just play Blitz now, you would get the default version of isolated, and this according to me has to be, I won't say the worst, but the least interesting version among all the isolated. I really don't know how to describe this version, but it just looks pale in comparison to all the other versions. Problem is the shadows don't really feel so prominent in this version. The graphics feel a little toned down in comparison to the previous versions of isolated. This is one of the versions of isolated that I'm not really a fan of. Then let's move to number 4, and this according to me was the older version of the isolated, and the reason why I'm putting this above the current version of the isolated is whenever I see the old clips of me playing Battle Royale, this version just hits different in comparison to any other version of the isolated. The thing is, it wasn't the most optimized one. It had a lot of aliasing. It felt a little too colorful in some places, but despite that, it looked much better than the current version of the isolated. Like, it felt a little more detailed. To be honest, there was no much frame drops back in the time. Also, the things like the shadows and the sunlight in this version also felt really good. Whenever I see the old footages, it just feels that the pace of the game was slightly slower than what we have currently, but still, playing this version of the isolated is one of the best memories of me playing isolated, especially with the old looting system and the old health system that we had. This version of the isolated takes me back into the nostalgia. Then coming in at number 3, we have the Sandstorm version that we currently have if we play isolated and even Blackout. The thing that I observe in the current version is that the lighting conditions somewhat feel similar to the old version of the isolated that I put in at number 4. Especially the sunlight condition in the current Sandstorm, I feel it was similar how we had it in the old version of the isolated. Also to add, there is obviously Sandstorm in one of the locations in the map, but apart from that, the overall map looks really good. The visibility goes on obviously in the area where the Sandstorm is, and that's when the new kind of scopes that they added in the game, which is the thermal scopes, come in, and it becomes really chaotic if the zone ends in these regions. So it has a nice element of surprise to it. Weather conditions change at a specific spot itself. So at number 3, we had the Sandstorm version of the map. Okay, so let's move to number 1 because we already done with number 2, which was the Halloween version 2021. Coming in at number 1 would be the Halloween 2020 version of isolated. I really don't know why I like this map so much. One of the best memories that I have playing Call of Duty Mobile Battle Royale was when I played this map. The problem was this map was literally available to play for maximum of 2 days. I only remember playing this on the 31st of October 2020, and the very next day we got the same isolated map back. So I think it was only available to play for 1 or maybe 2 days. The reason why I love that map so much is it had a unique thrill. Visibility beyond even say 30 meters was not possible. Also, the cool part was it gave such a unique look to the same isolated that we play. It was even tough to find out what exact location you are in, so you had to heavily rely on minimap is how I remember this. And also vehicles was next to useless in this map because there was no visibility at all. So in the current isolated we just move around in choppers or vehicles to cover up the distance, but that was not even possible because you keep running into stuff, and if you're flying a chopper you keep running into terrains or just stars in the middle. So in this map the best strategy was to actually be on foot and just make sure you rotate into the zone, which is what made this map really hardcore and really thrilling to play this one. So at number 1 was the Halloween 2020 version of the Isolated. That would be all, guys. Those are my top 5 versions of Isolated according to me. Would really love to know your top 5 versions of the Isolated list in the comment section. Make sure you share this video with all your Battle Royale friends. I'm sure they would love this video as well. And subscribe to this channel if you really like the content that I make. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.